So I was thinking this morning, I never did a New Year's resolution. Mostly because I think they're corny. I already go to the gym. And in general, I'm a big self-improvement guy. Like, I need a white noise app at night to drown out the thoughts of what to do. How can something get better? I'm obsessive with those kinds of things. I think it's healthy to a degree, but sometimes it can be a little paralyzing. And so if anything, I probably need to make an adjustment more so there than anything. But I kind of have one now, which is I'm really going to try hard to stop qualifying things when it comes to the Leafs. The idea of going, I know the Leafs are first in the standings, right? It's like, I'm kind of sick of that talk. I feel as though part of the reason why people are at times hesitant to be critical of the Leafs when they play poorly, or part of the reason why I think genuinely the Leafs have had difficulty maturing, is that there is always qualifying, because there's this like weird fear that any type of critique or any type of meaningful self-analysis or public self-analysis will lead to a panic, a fervor, a meltdown in the city, right? Don't you guys get that sense? It's like, even when you're, not so much when you're talking with your friends, but whenever I do this publicly, it's just always, hey, and there's a lot of good things too, but also maybe William Nylander should have more than one goal in 11 games. I know William Nylander's going to bounce back, and he's a terrific player. He's a terrific talent, and I'm not worried about the Shut up. Nobody speaks that way with their friends. Like, this guy's been horrible lately. That's how you speak to your friends. And you, the people, especially the subscribers to the podcast. Oh, the friends. That's why I try to reply to DMs, is because I appreciate it. I appreciate the time. So we are in this together. So I'm going to try actively moving forward to stop qualifying. And if you think that every criticism is just a full-blown panic, I would suggest that you look inwardly, because it probably says more about you and your fears about this team and the belief or the idea that you have actually bought into the premise in which the Toronto Maple Leafs are being held back because their fans care too much, or because the media speaks about them, as though that is not something that has happened with, say, the world champion Boston Celtics, right? Think Celtics fans? You know who else gets spoken about? Almost every other team. Hockey's just weird because there are a lot of teams that actually don't get any publicity and aren't really spoken about. It's a sport that does have the San Jose Sharks and the Anaheim Ducks and the Utah hockey clubs, where there's probably two people on the beat at any given time. And so the comparison gets to be, well, look at those guys. They get to just play hockey. And look at all the success, the recent success of the Anaheim Ducks with all the lack of media pressure that they have. God, are they thriving with it? So let's start today with some critiques. The team won't do it. The team, they're not going to do it, so somebody should. Somebody should say something, because publicly anyways, Craig Berube ain't doing it. I got a little theory on that. Some of the players ain't doing it, as we outlined with Mitch Marner and his "I thought we played well" comments, which, again, get reiterated by the coach a night later after. I don't know. I honestly don't know it anymore with this stuff. So there's a little bit of a fear of public accountability. Oh, we don't want to turn things into a story. But as I mentioned yesterday, the more you do stuff like that, the more you actually make it a story with the diehard fans, with the people that follow this team and have been invested in this core through its entirety. So here's a little bit of what I'm seeing right now. The Leafs are in first place in the Atlantic. Cool. That's nice. Is the Atlantic full of juggernauts this season that I'm unaware of? I know we get trapped in our silos, and hockey is very much a regional sport, right? It was, at one point, absolutely a real national sport in this country. It remains that for some people. I think that now the fantasy heads, There's diehards that try to watch, as many games as possible, as many teams as possible. There's fantasy people that track the rest of the league. But for the most part, it is very similar to baseball, where, and I think most sports are kind of going in this direction outside of football, because football, everybody has a fantasy team and everybody gambles on all the games, and they do spread out the events in a certain way that makes it really conducive to following all of the teams. Basketball used to be a little bit more like that, but again, I think it's becoming more regional than it is national, especially with the diminishing attributes of the LeBron Jameses and the Kevin Durants and the Steph Currys as they kind of go into more of the middle area of the league, and we're trying to transition into buying into new stars. But the Leafs are 8th in the NHL standings right now, and they're just a point up on 3 other teams, a couple of which actually have games in hand. The Atlantic, the story of the season has essentially been, hey, the Bruins are a massive disappointment. Hey, the Senators are turning it around and getting goaltending now, but they've had large stretches of disappointment. Montreal has gone from a rebuild to potentially a buyer, but ultimately, that's not exactly a juggernaut of a team. The Tampa Bay Lightning have been fine, but over the years, I think we would acknowledge that they have been kind of in a slow decline, right? And the Florida Panthers are defending Stanley Cup champions. So I think they're given a little bit of grace when it comes to the up and down nature of their performances so far. Because guess what? When you win, you get the benefit of the doubt that you can do it again. And you certainly do when it comes to back-to-back playoffs where they've been spectacular. The Leafs don't get that benefit of the doubt, okay? So when the trouble areas pop up, you're reminded that this is a team that throughout the core 4 era, well, I guess the core 3 because Tavares wasn't here from the outset, they've won a playoff series. So when the trouble signs start to perk up and people talk about the record and how they've done in 1-goal games and how great the goaltending has been, you say, that's fine for a certain amount of time. But now, again, they're 8th in the standings. And if you compare them, as Luke Fox did yesterday, to the other division leaders when it comes to goal differential, they're the group that stands out amongst them as the least impressive. The Capitals are plus 63 in goal differential. The Jets plus 48. The Golden Knights plus 34. The Maple Leafs are plus 8 now. This isn't a team that runs away with a ton of games. This isn't a team that's just browbeating the division. This isn't a team that looks materially different than teams from years past. They've been pretty mediocre, if not, let's be honest, bad for a decent stretch here. Yeah, they ripped off 5 wins in a row, and they deserve credit for that. They deserve credit for the reasons that they're in the standings. But, man, I think it was Ennis that pointed out yesterday that I think they're 2 points better through 45 games, but that's with top 5 save percentages. Their high-danger opportunities have completely shrunk. Myrtle pointed that out yesterday. It's like their first 20 games, high-danger chances at even strength, they were 5th in the NHL. Now, over the last 25, they're 22nd. This team has not been trending in the right direction for a little while now. And you could go, oh, JD, but Matthews has been hurt. You go, yep. When did the power play look the best? It was when Matthews was hurt. It was when he was out. Did the team really suffer in the standings when Matthews was out? No. They were able to win games. They had their moments. They had their flashes. There's a lot of the same problems. Jake McCabe goes out. The blue line looks really thin and seems like it needs some additions on the back end. They still don't have secondary scoring. They've got other guys that are clearly not pulling their weight, i.e. Max Domi, who I think has still 3 goals this season and was signed to what is, for this team anyways, a significant contract at over $3 million a season. The Stars have gone into lulls, and there are games where they disappear at times. The power play has completely dried up. They're 0 for 2 yesterday, and I'm giving them credit because they're hitting posts. And most notably, as of late, and what I have felt the frustration of, and what I have personally felt frustration towards, is that the big change of the offseason was the head coach. And it's probably not the most fair position to be, really getting upset with Craig Berube, who's trying to find his bearings with a new team. And talking to Rick Bowness gave me some level of perspective when it came to, hey, it takes time to ingratiate yourself with a hockey team. And Craig Berube is probably not that far removed. Well, he is certainly not that far removed from guys like Jordan Kyrou saying, we're going to get our culture back now that he's gone. And so there might be a little bit of hesitancy for him with this new team, given what he's learned about them, to just be chastising them in the media. Ultimately, I don't care what a coach says in the media, but I do think that there can be a reflection of what has been presented to us, which is this accountability culture, right? when William Nylander plays as poorly as he did last night and he gets 22 minutes, I don't care if you're chasing the game. I look at that and say, well, where's the accountability culture that you were supposed to preach? Because if you're not doing it in the media and you're not doing it with ice time, I'm just supposed to assume that you're doing this well behind closed doors? Well, how am I meant to do that? I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, especially as the team is trending in a bit of the wrong direction in this month of January. No one's saying they can't win. No one's saying things can't be different, but there are signs that are indicating that it's a lot of the same. And for the new head coach, and when you only make that change, and he's supposed to bring something different, when he starts doing things that are very reflective of the coach that was here before, people can start to get up in arms about it. And that's what I think you have here, where a team happens to still be in first place in their division, has had a lot of positives that have come out of the season, but the fan angst over a 3-game losing stretch is not simply, oh, it's crazy Leaf fans and their crazy ways and their roller coaster ride and they're trying to run players out of town. No, it's totally justified. Anyways, one of those fans is Jackie Redmond of many things, WWE, TNT, Jackie Redmond Show. What's up, Jackie? How we doing?
Oh, my gosh. I was just literally fist pumping as you were talking with everything you were just saying. Like, I usually enjoy your rants, but that was like everything I wanted to say off the top.
Sorry.
No, it's okay, because we can just dive deeper into a lot of these things. But we usually start with my travel. Who cares? Let's just talk hockey.
Well, we're doing your travel last. We're not supposed to start with your travel. We're supposed to start with the good stuff.
But here's the thing is, I hate that we live in, and maybe it's just Leaf fans. I don't necessarily think that's the case. And maybe it's because, a lot of the people I talk to about the Leafs and what's going on with them are my friends in the media. And you always get this oh, relax, they're in first place. Or it'll work itself out. It's this, it's that, whatever. It's this constant, you're overreacting condescension that you get from people when the Leafs have a bad 3 games. It's yes, we know that they're in first place. We know that their playoff lives are not in jeopardy. But can we just, feel it? Are we allowed to lean into our emotions, whether or not they're rational? And I think they're rational in this case. But it's I just feel like we're not allowed to be true sports fans anymore, because if you are and you do get upset about actual bad play and actual concerning things that are happening with your team, you're just labeled as someone that, oh, you don't watch enough hockey. Tell me you've never watched an 82-game season before. Every team goes through lulls, even all the cliches.
Yeah, every team goes through lulls and every team loses games thing is so condescending. You're okay, yeah, thanks.
I hate it. I hate it so much, because the reason I even do what I do or am who I am is because sports are an outlet. They are there for us to feel things, to take the stresses of our own friggin' lives and what's happening in them, and use it as an outlet and misdirect them and misguide them to other places. But you know what? Yeah. It's therapeutic. And oh my God, it's fun. I like getting mad watching the Leafs. I also enjoy watching them win. But I'm just so tired of this snobbery that happens where it's have you watched them? They're fine. No, actually, I don't think they're fine. And I actually enjoy that I can be on this roller coaster ride and feel all the things. Yeah. I just don't know why we constantly have to be it's all good. It's I'm not Mitch Marner. I don't think it's all good. I actually think we have a lot of problems.
Yeah. So I think that is well said. I will acknowledge for myself that it's not a straw man, because it's obviously a thing that's out there, but we are conditioned to take in criticism over compliments. They think it goes back to our evolution of just hey, this is dangerous. Remember that more than the thing that is happy. Live, survival. And unfortunately, we didn't know that social media was going to happen, where everyone was going to have an opinion on everything that's said. And I think now, it's funny because, there's traditional media spaces like this one that continue and the ones that we work in. But even for people who comment on the team and have just large social media followings, to me, that's that is the media now. That is a form of the media, is large accounts that have big followings and big opinions. And are constantly tracking the team, and I think that they deal with it too. But ultimately, you're right, is that I don't think there are people that are stopping you from being a fan, but I do think there is hesitancy from people because they're afraid of getting labeled a certain way and then not being in a community or something like that. And so with the Leafs, though, I think it's very hyper-emphasized because of, A, the market, the contrast between Toronto and some of the other markets that have, like, basically zilch following, right? Like, I don't know, have you ever had an interaction with, say, an Anaheim Ducks fan? How many of those exist, right? It's like if you do hot Anaheim Ducks tweets, you're not going to get massive pushback. I don't know what I'm sure that's there, and I'm sure they're following is diehard. But, yeah, there are problems with this team, and I think we should dig in on some of them. And, yeah, I started with the accountability stuff, and it seems like that's bothering you a bit too.
Yeah, well, I think just like that's kind of at the core, I think, of a lot of the Leafs' problems, because what we know for sure is that their problems are the same problems that it feels like they've had this entire time for the last 5 years, right? It's depth scoring. It's how do you take your core, whatever you want to call it, core 4, core 5, core 3. How do you win with that being the majority of your salary cap and the players that have to put you on their back and take you there? How do you do it? How do you fill out the rest of your lineup? How do you get scoring from other players when you have to cater to those 4 players that are taking up all the money? Like, I'm a broken record. It's the same problem. So then you have to ask the question, how do you deal with it, right? How do you fix it? How do you get other players performing? How do you fix a power play that's star-studded but doesn't know how to score goals for some weird reason? So I don't know. You guys had a great conversation yesterday, you and Chris Versteeg, about accountability, and I feel like, it's repetitive when Chris Versteeg is starting to sound like a broken record. I'm like, I've heard this guy say this a few times before, talking about the Black Hawks and what they would do with Patrick Kane if the first unit wasn't going, then the second unit would go out first with Hossa, and they would do these different things. But the difference between that team and I think a lot of Stanley Cup teams, especially recently, their depth was better than what the Leafs have right now, at least to this point. Can that change? Maybe. But in order for that depth to be productive and contribute and help, it's become very, very so obviously clear that you have to make changes to your lines as they pertain to your superstars. Like, it doesn't seem like rocket science, but I think it's the ripple effect of those decisions that holds the Leafs back. And I think, I don't know, let's just start with this question. Like, JD, can you think of one time in the last 5 years, like a real time, where Matthews or Marner truly did not get what they wanted or were truly held accountable, not by the fans or the media, by the team when things were not going well?
Yeah.
Can you think of one standout time?
Yeah, it's the thing that I mentioned last night, actually, when Marner got 2 shifts skipped against the Anaheim Ducks under Sheldon Keefe.
I knew you were going to say that. That doesn't even count.
I know. Listen, I'm with you. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just telling you that that's the only thing that comes to mind.
But think about that, right?
Yeah.
Think about that. That was a nothing burger. The fact that Marner was even upset about that is effing ridiculous. Yeah. He missed basically no time. He missed maybe 60, maybe 90 seconds that he would have played in a game that was over anyway, because if memory serves, I think that was in the third period. That doesn't count.
Well, and then his coach apologized.
Yeah, and then that's the whole thing. And then Sheldon Keefe apologized, and it was the whole thing. So, and me specifically, like, I really gave it to Sheldon Keefe at that time, and I still stand by that. But if I will say, just as a disclaimer, because you have to do that now when you have opinions, is like, obviously Tavares gave up the C this year, right? Like, that's a big sacrifice in terms of like a big picture thing. And I'm sure the C meant a lot to him. But if you want to wear the C and you want to make the big money, then I think you have to be willing to accept not just that you're going to be criticized by the media, but that you are going to be the one that has to maybe make a sacrifice for the betterment of the team. And I'm not talking about, we got to get the power play going for the next month. I'm talking about getting this team to a point that when we get to April and you're playing in a 7-game series and it's way harder for your stars, specifically Mitch Marner, for a multitude of reasons, but one being his size and just the way that he handles bodies on him in a way that they just aren't in the regular season. You need the guys around you, your Domies and your Lorenzes, I guess, and whoever, to help contribute. So if one of these players would actually make a real legitimate sacrifice, whether that's power play time or playing with the person they want to play with, Marner and Matthews clearly like playing together, and I get it. But it's not just about fixing it for them or fixing for the power play. Maybe if Matthews and Marner were on separate lines and you had three big dogs on three separate lines, maybe you ignite something in a Max Domi or whatever, and then you have that piece with you. But if you never make those sacrifices and you never make it about more than just your stars, then I don't think you're ever going anywhere when it actually counts. How can you think that it would? So I feel like we've all said this a million times in terms of accountability, but when you look at it, to me, and reading between the lines and seeing now that there's another coach here who's supposed to be known as being this guy that holds players accountable and can be a hard ass if he needs to be, and it's the same story and the same lack of seemingly accountability being applied to the stars, then it's like, okay, how much influence do Matthews and Marner actually have over this team? Mm-hmm. Because maybe Berube wants to split them up. Maybe he wants to take someone off that top power play unit, but are his hands tied? Because I'm starting to believe that maybe that's the case.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a plausible theory, which, if it is true, is really scary considering the time where you're supposed to have the most juice as a coach is essentially now, right? And maybe he would argue that it would be next season after he's and I've tried to present this theory of Berube might be a little bit gun shy, given that he had fallings out with some of his younger players in St. Louis and was dismissed pretty quickly after a Stanley Cup, which is pretty rare, honestly. And that one of his pieces of evolution was like, you know what, maybe I got to handle these guys a little bit differently than I have in years prior. And maybe I got to gain their trust a little bit more before I start really giving them the stick instead of just going, hey, I'm with you, I'm with you, I'm with you. And that's his strategy up until this point. But yeah, I think a lot of us, especially on the outside, are looking at it and saying, these guys have already had a long run of that. Like, they've already had their opportunity to run the asylum, essentially, right? They're looking for some tough discipline at this point. They need some tough love. They have to have that accountability. And I think the team acknowledged that again in the hiring of this guy and the language that they were using. And oftentimes we read too much into that, and really it's just like a PR thing that they concoct, and they go, this is the messaging that we're going to give with all of this. But if your leadership changed to give Matthews the captaincy and your head coach changed, those are the two significant things. And you went out during the offseason and preached about accountability and building that kind of culture and getting other guys involved, and that the book on Berube was going to be, hey, getting everyone involved. I think it's legitimate to look at a situation where he puts Steven Lorentz up on the first line, and then halfway through the second period, he doesn't see another shift, right? He finishes with 10 minutes after getting promoted to the top line. Go, wait, aren't you supposed to be getting other guys involved? Why are the other guys not feeling involved? McMahon has felt that for times, right? And he's seemingly, he's flourished at points this season. When was Max Domi most effective last year? It's when they lost a guy and he had to step up his role and was given more and felt like he became an outside core piece of the team. Like, we've actually seen these examples of when a star is out and they're forced to pivot into different looks, and when other guys are given more opportunity, that it has worked for the Leafs. And yet when everyone's healthy, they tend to revert back to the exact same thing that's always happened, and then familiar patterns show up. And they preach like, oh, well, be patient with us and look at the standings and look at the overall points and how could you really
patient enough.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you actually have real indicators that the splitting up of guys and the involvement of other players will work. And yet there seems to still be this reluctance to do it. And so you're right. It's tough to put your finger on why exactly that is at times.
Well, I just think they're trying to protect people. And I get it. You need your stars. That's the whole theory and philosophy with which this team was built, that you will win if you have Matthews, Marner, Nylander, and Tavares in his prime. But that ship has somewhat sailed. I'm not saying he's having a bad year. I'm just saying, he's not what he was when they got him. And Yet here we are where the problem remains the same. So, for Berube, it's like, okay, like, let's just pretend, like, if you're the coach, would you do the power play, or would you split up Matthews and Marner and have one big guy on each line? What would you do, JD?
I would do it all. I would do, first of all.
You do both.
First of all, I think that at this point, they've sort of painted themselves into a corner with the 5-forward power play thing. That they already had, like, Tree Living spoke about the power play, and Savard just took them out for an extra session to practice ripping the puck around and being more decisive with their passes and shots and blah, 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 blah. So I don't think that you can split the power play quite yet. You're going to have to give it a bit of a runway here after you did hey, we're giving these guys this chance. You have to have it exist for more than 2 opportunities against I think the second best power play in the NHL. One
Agreed.
Where they would argue, well, we hit a bunch of posts in the first one and we could have had goals. And you're like, right. Okay. So remove the excuses. I know.
Yeah.
I'm with you. And I would say that they had their chances for a long time. But even still, I think that after that, you're saying, okay, 5 forwards, you've got the week essentially. Like, you're playing Sheldon Keefe's Devils team. And then who do they play Saturday night? I think the Habs. Habs aren't exactly impossible to score on. Even with Team Canada goalie Sam Montembeault. Well, that was a good choice. They get these next couple of games to prove that there's going to be something and get a goal and get the result. And if not, I would immediately split the 2 power plays. And I've said this before. I'd have one that has Matthews and Marner and the other one that has Tavares and Nylander. And then the other pieces that are around it, pick and choose. Whoever's going, basically flip them in terms of who gets what opportunity and when. Involve a guy like Max Domi more. Obviously Matthew Nyes is already there, but involve a guy like Bobby McMahon a little bit more. Get people feeling like they are invested and have them be doing the 1-minute thing. Because, again, the accountability stuff, even yesterday, it's like, I know, again, chasing the game, but they take a timeout so that power play unit can stay out there who haven't done anything. And you're like, okay, I guess these guys are going to do it. And what did it result in? A bad Mitch Marner turnover and a couple of point shots from him where you went, all right, I guess so. I guess that's the strategy that everybody's drawing up. Fine. If it doesn't work over the next couple of games, I split them. But I would already be looking at, hey, how can we get the other guys involved? And how can it feel like if you guys are not dominating, especially like the circumstance of this, I know I'm running a little long here. I'll try to tighten this up. But the Leafs lost. They get shut out. They get booed off the ice. And then they show up and they get one goal, right? They played well in the first 10 minutes, but the rest of the game, they kind of go away. And the response from the coach is like, well, doesn't every team get booed off the ice? It's like, dude, you're in first place and the fans are pissed off about 2 straight games. This isn't about winning. Like, this isn't just like, oh, we boo every time they lose. This isn't Philadelphia. This is Toronto, where when people see a problem, that's when they start to do it. When they start to see frustration with you being 25 games where you're, 25th or 20th in high danger opportunities, that's when they start to wring their hands and go, we'd like to see some goals when you've got all this star level talent and the power plays drying up. So yeah, I would immediately do the 3 lines, 3 stars, and try to ask each one of them to help drive a line. I'd put Marner with Tavares, I would put Matthews with 2 different wingers, and then I would put Nylander on a line of his own where he can drive it as well.
Agreed. And I think that you and I, based on our conversations, have both felt that way, beyond this season of like, you can always go back to Matthews and Marner. And it's a great thing to be able to just go to when you are fighting in an important game late and you need a goal. Like, I've just never understood why it's the reverse, because I think that they're like, if those players as individuals are not good enough, and I think we all think they are, to drive a line and to find chemistry with other people, then like, why would we even be paying them what they're being paid? Mm-hmm. Like, they are superstars for a reason. And I think, the fans booing and all of that getting sort of like overblown and the team trying to say, well, this happens to everyone. It's not just that you've lost 3 games in a row. It's that the things that are supposed to be your strength as a team are not working. That's why it's concerning. Nobody's getting up in arms about if Joseph Wall goes on a bad stretch or gets hurt again. Like, nobody, like, will we be upset? Yes, of course. You need goaltending. But, like, that's not the strength of the Toronto Maple Leafs coming into the season, and I don't think anyone's eyes it was supposed to be, right? The strength is supposed to be the superstars and their ability to provide offense no matter what. Mm-hmm. And they should be able to do that whether they play together or they don't. But, like, let's say they do that. They split everybody up and they've got big guys on each line, right? But if you do that and all of a sudden maybe two of the top three lines are producing and things are going well, but maybe it's Marner's line that just isn't working. And now Marner, who's having this great season, who's, working for a contract, now he's not happy. How much are we trying to avoid that situation? And if we are trying to avoid that situation, why? It's because we want to keep him. Or I'm speaking like I'm the front office. I just think there's so many things at play. And every time I think about it, it comes back to the fact that I think at the core of everything, this front office, and maybe it's Truthing, maybe it's Shanny, I don't know, but it feels like the happiness of a handful of individuals has been and continues to be the most important priority for the front office, despite the fact that we know it doesn't work. You need more than that. So while Marner can go off and have an amazing season and ask for all the money in the world next year, and Matthews can get the captaincy and he's dealt with injuries, but like he'll have his year and he'll be good. Like everything else matters too. And I just don't think that it's been prioritized. I think we see example after example after example that it's not. And it's the reason you and Sam have your whole team, team A, team B, or whatever it is that you call it, is because of that. And if it doesn't change, this team will never win a Stanley Cup. Like I don't believe it. So I hope that they change it. And I hope they split them up. And I hope that as a team, they can realize that by doing so, by sacrificing maybe some points for Marner and maybe some power play time for Nylander or whatever, however you want to do it, that it will make everyone else around them better. And maybe Marner needs to be pissed off. Maybe Marner needs to hear from somebody inside the team, inside the organization, not the media or the fans, that like, the team is not good enough, and someone needs to get moved around. And hey, Marner, if you're worth $100 million, like you say that you are, and you want to be one of the highest paid players in the league, like then can we not lean on you to go drive another line where Matthews isn't there and make it work and get the most of, like that should motivate him. Like you want to be a leader, you want to be one of the best players ever or of your time, whatever. Like, that's what you have to – you should embrace that. You should want that. You should want someone coming to you and be like, I know you really like playing with Matthews, but we really need you to help us get this line going. So we're going to split you guys up, and when when crap hits the fan and stuff gets hard, we'll put you and Matthews back together in those late-game situations. But for now, can you help us get more out of the people around you? Because as long as it's just you and Matthews – and Nylander and Tavares trying to get everything done for the entire team, it's just not going to work, and you're never going to win a cup, and you're just going to be one of the highest paid players in the league that doesn't win. So what are we doing? Like, they should be motivated by that. They should actually, I think, want that.
Well, yeah.
They should want to be split up.
Yeah, I've talked a lot about where they're at age-wise and how it's their, like, primes, and that after all of these playoff losses and – after the feelings that they, I think, should have when they go through stuff like this of familiarity where they go, damn, this is, we've been here before, that the immediate reaction should not be to get on the defensive and to try to, calm the waters, that shouldn't be the priority of, hey, get out here and make sure that we don't have a quote that gets blown out of proportion or preach that everything is fine and that they're just getting snake bit. It should be, hey, this isn't good enough right now. And do we want this to continue? Do we want to habit form this, or do we want to break old habits? And that's why it's supposed to be important to have outside perspective on what it is that you do and why it is important to have things like mentors and bosses who you respect, because like when things aren't going great, someone is supposed to tell you some of the hard truths and help you make those adjustments so that you can get the best out of yourself. And to kind of tie it back, that has been my disappointment with Berube as of late is I really thought that it was supposed to be about getting other guys involved and having this really feel like a team, and it just doesn't. It still feels like the top guys and the other guys, and it doesn't feel as though there is a changing priority of, we want the accountability rather than we want the protection for those guys, and that's kind of what we're driving at. And then to the kind of next thing, it's There's this idea, and they talked about it because Trey Living was speaking the other day and mentioning about different pieces that they want to go out and get, that Toronto's ails are just going to be solved by an addition of another guy, right? Like, it's the issue with the core four is not that it's the core four. It's that they need another guy. It's that they need another center. You go, okay, well, again, the price of not having that guy is having the other dudes on those contracts, but whatever. It's like the Leafs, they're limited in terms of what they have trade asset wise. They've got a first round pick.
Yeah.
I think it's for next year, not even this season. They've got Easton Cowan, and they've got Fraser Minton, who I'm not sure why they would be so enthusiastic about moving either of those guys, even though the window is shrinking because Matthews is only here for a certain amount of time, and he is a superstar who has now dealt with an injury that's nagging and has been beat up in the past. So there's part of you that goes, yeah, there's some urgency here, but they also haven't had waves of talent that have helped them out. Those first-round picks that have come up and provided that depth that they've so sorely needed. So they've always kind of like robbed Peter to pay Paul when it comes to the depth of this team. So it's like finally you got a couple of guys that you could.
You know what? I feel bad for some of these depth players, right? Because there could be situations, like I know, like it's difficult to build around the core for the reasons that we've talked about forever. So I don't even know why I feel like I have to mention it, but whatever. Like you bring in these pieces, whether it's at the deadline or in the off season, and you want them to be the fix. You want to bring them in and be like, okay, now we'll have depth, but it's like you still haven't really tried to pair any of that depth truly with a Matthews or a Mark. I mean, I know they put Lorentz on the top line yesterday, but like I'm talking about moving someone down. I'm not talking about moving someone up.
Yeah, it was. I think it was 6 minutes of ice time that Lorentz got with the top guys before he was stapled to the bench and then went back to the fourth line.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's so frustrating, and I feel like we've never truly given the Matthews-Marner split a legitimate go, and it's just. I don't know why. I don't understand.
Well, I think that it's some of the stuff that you talk about, which is protectionist culture, but also it's like you have to be balancing the fear of the other thing as the head coach, which is if you invest in that, right? Like you say, we're going to go with 3 lines and we're going to see how this works. You can't just run it for a game or two and then flip back because then nothing has changed, right?
So you have to commit. You
got to commit to it. And then what happens if you start to lose these games or those guys don't show chemistry and all of a sudden you are chasing it? You know what's going to happen is the lines are going to go into a blender and then you're going to see what you saw last night, which is double shifting Nylander and giving him 22 minutes of ice time and Matthews hitting 20 and Marner hitting 20 and you're going to end up kind of with a similar spot. That's it. Is Berube should, I guess I shouldn't even say should because I'm not an NHL head coach, whatever. But I think that it would behoove them to lose some of the smaller battles in the aim of winning a war and using some of this time that they have where they are first division, they are trying to chase this to show that, hey, there is some urgency here and maybe there is a plan outside of the thing that we have tried every year to very similar results. Like, let's just take an extended look at it. Let's have 2 weeks of the schedule where we try to see what we have with some of these other guys. And again, maybe that does impact what they do at the deadline. Like maybe it emboldens them. Maybe it makes them feel like, well, you know what? Now we know with conclusivity that moving Domi back up to play with Matthews is not getting enough, or it's not working for this team in a way that makes us feel fine about it. But at least, again, find something else out, do something different. God, for not just the sake of the fans, but the sake of you. And yeah, it is an entertainment product. And even as we were talking about this, I'm thinking, imagine you watched a really good TV show. And you're like, damn, that's really good. And then the second season was the exact same. And you're like, okay, that was a little strange. And then the third season was the exact same. And the fourth season was the exact same. There's like minor little plot details, minor little character injections, but you were watching the same show over and over. I think by season 8, you probably want to tap out.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so hard to even, maybe not so hard, but I find it difficult to even talk about the team in some ways because I feel like it's the same dream over and over and over again. And you want something new to hang on to. You want something new to grasp at. And it's so frustrating to feel like you're just having the same conversations over and over and over again with a couple of very minor changes that came way too late. So it's like, it's so frustrating to be a Leafs fan for that reason. But again, like, they are in first. I get it. They're competitive. I just don't see this as a recipe for success in the postseason, especially, I think you mentioned it in your rant before I came on, the goal differential tweet. I forget who tweeted it, but
Luke.
That's a pretty stark difference with a team that is their strength is supposed to be offense and scoring. And on top of that, the league isn't even that competitive this year. This is a year where the Leafs might have a decent path to winning a Stanley Cup, and yet the one thing that they're supposed to be really good at, they can't even do when they have an extra man. So I don't know. It's just
well, I think it's especially.
And I don't know if you saw Coach Chippy's video from last night. Did you see it?
I didn't.
You know who that is?
Of course, I know who that is. He's very funny. I like his work a lot.
He did one on, it's the guys in the dressing room, and he did one where they're talking about the Shanna plan. They're like, oh, the Shanna plan. What's the Shanna plan? Yeah. Where's the Shanna plan? They bring out a book and read what's in there. And it's it's actually really funny. I implore everyone to go watch it. I don't want to butcher it by not saying it right. But it's true. How many years into this are we?
Yeah. That's it.
And maybe it's fine. And it's not fine to not win a Stanley Cup, but it's you could be X amount of years into the Shanna plan and not have won a cup, but at least you want to see some improvement. You hope that you're not talking about the same things you were talking about 5 years ago. And it feels like we still are. We're having all of the same exact conversations without making different moves or different changes. So, if you go to kind of echo your sentiments in your TV show analogy, it's if you're playing a game of chess and you're making the exact same moves every single time, regardless of what your opponent's doing and regardless of your results, where are you going?
Yeah.
Nowhere.
Well, it's like the power play last night to me.
Of the pieces that you have.
It's the same bar with the team right now in a weird way, which is, hey, just look different, look better. When they rang 2 off the post, you're like, that's a step. That's something. Yeah, the goal is to win a Stanley Cup, and I think anything other than that is kind of loser mentality. But ultimately, I think fans would feel at least hey, you're getting closer to that if you start to take more meaningful steps towards it. And I would say the one thing has been that they've protected leads much better, and they have had that elite goaltending this season. It's been so much better.
Yeah, which has been awesome.
Yeah, it's been great. But also, it's if your goal differential is +8 and you got one of the best tandems in all of hockey, and your goaltending has been top 5 in the league, that's it's something. Jackie Redmond, thanks as always for making time. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, guys.